Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 13th of April. And joining me on this edition, Steve Withers.
Spam.
Kaz Harlow.
Those rednecks are probably enjoying this whole thing.
Ed Selley.
Only person who could miss with this gun is the sucker with the bread to buy it.
And Mark Botwright.
My granddad was a priest in Trinidad.
Welcome back to the podcast. As always, our thanks once again to everybody that's working hard. It was brought home to me this week because I went to Tesco, and I did it deliberately. I went on an evening when it was going to be quieter than during the day, and I'm worrying myself about what I'm touching and what I'm picking up and not touching my face and all the rest of it. And then it dawns on me that there's about 25 people filling shelves, stacking shelves, working there, and they're having to turn up every day for work, otherwise they don't get paid. You know, they're having to go in, they're having to stack the shelves, and I've got to say the shelves, probably for the first time since this whole thing started and the panic buying and everything, the shelves were full. And I've got to say, what a nice bunch of people. There was one or two of them cracking jokes, and especially in the pasta section, because there was pasta to buy, and it was a nice experience. And
was there flour though?
No. I don't think there's flour anywhere.
Everyone's home baking, aren't they?
except that the vast majority of that flour is busy being converted into inedible mess.
Probably.
I mean, there's a select number of people I know who are excellent bakers. They are doing some baking. There's also a larger group of people that I know who are not in any way, shape or form bakers, and they're sat on quantities of flour which they're busy turning into bin fodder. So, you know, it's not going similarly well.
The people with kids that I don't get. This whole thing during the crackdown where they're saying, you know, only kind of, you know, serve food for yourself and that kind of thing. So lots of kind of middle class families are deciding now's the time they want to like bake bread with their children, sticky fingers in amongst it, and then, oh, look what I've served up. You know,
anyway, I was trying to make a serious point there, which was well done to everybody that's going into work, putting themselves on the front line, putting themselves at risk, so we can continue to do what we do and the country keeps working. So thank you very much. And of course, that goes for the NHS and everything else. We're going to have a bit of a laugh and a joke, hopefully, tonight. Hopefully take your minds off it a little bit and so on. We're doing that. We're not being disrespectful at any point. We do realise that there's a crisis ongoing and all the rest, which is why we want to try and take your mind off it for at least an hour and a half.
But put seriously, us taking things seriously is not going to make anything any better. We tried that ages ago, and it had no effect at all.
No, exactly.
Anyway, we're British. We love a good crisis. Nothing brings us together more than a bit of crisis. Suddenly, the whole country's in a good mood.
Well, I don't know about that.
3 years of 4 years of bitter arguing and stuff like that. I think the country suddenly seems a lot happier.
I've had to empty quite a few of my so-called Facebook friends this week because I am so sick of hearing conspiracy theories about 5G. Most of them on my friends list are microbiologists and scientists, and suddenly they're world experts on everything. They've been getting kicked this week because I've had enough of the nonsense that's going on. I really have. So I'm surprised you say that, Steve, because I'm starting to see the other side of it now. I think just some of the sheer stupidity.
It is a reminder that social media is largely a toilet. I think people's general sense of well-being under these circumstances is inversely proportional to the amount of time they're devoting to social media.
Yeah.
I don't want to make it any more of a pointed comment than that, but I would remind you that there is a world of films, music, books, God, even terrestrial television, which is not arguing with complete strangers for the approval of people that you've never met and don't care about. I have to be honest, I've learnt this lesson the very hard way, because until Brexit, randomly picking an argument with a complete stranger on Twitter or Facebook was something I found embarrassingly cathartic. But no, walk away. There's nothing to be gained from it. The only caveat to that is that if you believe that 5G and coronavirus are in some way related to one another, please don't breed.
Fucking idiot.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's no addressing that.
And don't forget, AVForums has loads of forums where you can go and have arguments with loads of people.
Yeah, but have an argument about something unrelated to the current. You know, dig out a spot of LCD versus OLED goodness, or
bring back 3D.
Oh yes, actually that could be an entertaining reminiscence.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the positives of AVForums, and I have to point it out that we have a dedicated moderation team who are excellent.
Actually, I've just had a brainwave, guys. You know, at the moment, like they're showing historic football matches, could we not do a properly controlled experiment where we do the Blu-ray versus HD DVD argument all over again? Just in a closed cycle without, any sort of, reference to the future. We just have a proper argument on the merits of the format and, how it was inevitable that HD DVD was going to win.
So what we do is we find the old threads and we just release them in time.
I make a different argument now, though, because I'm with hindsight, I'm glad Blu-ray won. It had more storage capacity, so you have things like 3D and 4K Blu-ray.
Yeah, most of my arguments from the time would be saying, about how streaming won't take over from physical media and that kind of stuff. So I don't really want to go back and visit how wrong I was about everything.
Yeah, which is why I don't think you can have that argument now. But what you could do is go back to the threads as they were and release them each post at a time, so you could follow them in real time.
Release the threads.
Do you know what? That's not a bad idea.
Until one of your posts turns up and you suddenly, did I say that? Really?
I'd like to say I've been on the right side of history for quite a few of these.
I haven't. I thought HD DVD at the time, because of the codec it was using and so on, I thought it was better.
Yeah, I was very pro HD DVD. Although ironically, much like Kevin Smith, who had to eat his words later, if you ever bought the original Laserdisc release of Chasing Amy, the commentary track starts with him going DVD, and then when the DVD came out, he had to do a little filmed intro saying, at the beginning of the commentary track, you might hear some crazy guy saying DVD. Now, that was not me. I would never say that. DVD helped put my kid through school. That's just crazy talk. And I was in a similar boat. I was like anti-DVD until I saw it, and then I was like, "Oh, bollocks! This is going to cost me."
Yeah, I tried to. I held out though, Steve, till 2000. It wasn't until the Matrix turned up that I eventually gave in.
I mean, we can't be right about everything. I grant you that. I believed that minidisc had a future, although that was pre-forum.
Oh, I did, yeah.
Bring back 8-track. That's what I say.
I'd really like I think the internet should have like about a kind of 5-year limit, whereby at the end of that 5 year, everything beforehand gets wiped. So all your old posts.
I completely disagree. The Wayback Machine is just a magnificent.
If anyone ever finds the post somewhere in the football thread where I suggest that Liverpool should sign Carlton Cole, I'd just nuke it, please.
But it's I don't know. I like the permanence of it. It serves to remind us that we're we're fallible for the most part.
That we learn, Ed. I think that's about it.
Or we don't.
Well, we do slowly, but well, there you go. Maybe there are some historical options for AVForums that we could look into if this draws itself out any longer.
I saw you make some chili, Ed. Great minds and all the rest of it. I've been doing exactly the same this week, although I've got a sneaking suspicion that I'll survive mine.
I've survived mine. I haven't left the house today.
Yeah, but I wouldn't survive yours. I know that.
What chilies did you put in?
Scotch bonnets. Can I say, though, I've been storing I bought quite a large bag of them when I was last in Sainsbury's, and I'd frozen them. Chopping frozen Scotch bonnets, absolute game changer.
Yeah,
brilliant. I'm never going back. Even now, even if I'm using them on the day I buy them, I'm freezing them first because they're incredibly
seeds out really easily. Yeah.
Oh, as I say, probably the most exciting thing that happened to me yesterday. But 2 Scotch bonnets and some of the habanero sauce that I have, that cooking sauce that I have kicking around as well. It was a lively plate of chili. No getting around that. But it's not like I've had anything else to do today.
I think if I had some of your chili, I'd have 2 of the symptoms of corona, because I wouldn't be able to taste or smell anything.
You break yourself in gently. The only thing I would say is for using the very hot chilies, I don't know what Mark does, because I know he also uses some lovely ones. I have found that blending them into a base of tomatoes with coriander and so on and so forth, essentially creating a paste, makes for a much more even dissemination of heat than leaving little fragments of them actually physically in the chili itself. I've long done that, and I think it's it works better. And also, as long as you cook it for a bit of time, the heat breaks down gently to become a sort of all-consuming warmth rather than, like trying to eat pepper spray. So it all works for me.
I've lost a stone since the 11th of March.
Yes, well done on that. I mean, it's important to stress that you've done that deliberately rather than inability to buy food.
Yeah, but I think it's been tough. A few times it's been tough. And Friday was tough because the fish and chip shop's straight across the street. And of course, and it's still open. They've installed big shutters
like
and screens.
Giant Lazy Susan or something.
And there's just this little cutout where they pass your fish and chips through it, and machines on the outside so you can tap your card against it. But no, I didn't go. I resisted.
Well done.
But I've got to say, the temptation was there. And normally the temptation would be there if I was going to Tesco's or whatever, because the McDonald's is next to it, so I'd be dipping in for a McFlurry.
That's why you've lost the stones, because you can't get any. Most fast food is no longer available to you apart from the chippy.
It's very much like the Terry Waite diet or something.
It does help. I mean, obviously, my vices are more going to the pub and drinking an enormous quantity of extremely fattening beer, and I can't do that. I mean, I'm still rattling for a KFC, but that's purely because KFC is shut. The moment I'm actually able to buy a KFC, I'll probably become overcome with a degree of revulsion.
There was a guy in the news this week who's found what the recipe is. He's put it online. You could be doing it at home, Ed.
I have already had some really good fried chicken recipes. We were discussing this last week. It's a case of like you, but different. Because I'm still waiting for the failure in harvesting vegetables to do some serious weight loss. Then, but I thought about doing fried chicken, and I thought, no, step away from the vat of cooking oil and leave it be. And I mean, I wouldn't say I have definitely not lost a stone, but critically, for someone cooped up, I haven't gained anything, so we're doing all right.
Yeah, I mean, lockdown has helped slightly, but no, it's getting back into cooking again. That's what it was. I'd gotten out of the habit of doing it, and I've now got back into it again, and I'm enjoying it. But to keep things fresh, you've got to go out, unfortunately, and that's the challenge, isn't it? When you go up to
I mean, I don't think realistically, even for those of us that live on our own, I think it's still perfectly reasonable to travel to a supermarket once a week, and it's generally possible to do a 7-day fresh undertaking, unless you're going to say otherwise. I think that's not too difficult to buy.
I'm about 5 days. I can go 5 days, and then I have to go again.
I mean, it helps that, I mean, things like that chili I cooked last night. I mean, I'm at pains to stress it was a pretty large thing. I mean, that's three, possibly even 4 days worth of food.
I'm doing that every couple of days. I'm batch cooking a load of stuff and shoving it in the freezer and shoving stuff in the fridge. But it's the fresh stuff. It's like lettuce and spinach and all that kind of thing that you want to keep fresh to have with stuff.
Have you got a Sainsbury's anywhere near you? Sainsbury's frozen spinach. They do a frozen shredded spinach. And depending on what you're using it in, because obviously there are certain things that you've shown on social media where it's like big fresh leaves, and obviously it's never going to be a replacement for that. But for cooking with, they do a frozen shredded spinach. It's an absolute lifesaver of a substance, and it keeps obviously a very long time because it's frozen. That's well worth a look if you're looking to extend your reach a bit.
We haven't heard from Kaz. Is Kaz here?
Cooking, I agree. It's been great to do that, but I think what I've noticed more, at least certainly this Easter weekend, because I haven't had to work as much this Easter weekend, but this Easter weekend what I've really enjoyed is going on like 2-hour walks with the kids.
Oh, I don't know. That sounds a bit adult. You've got to be careful. There are certain police forces that will be on your ass for 2-hour walks, mate. Or do you carry a shopping bag with you at all times?
Why?
No, have you
just 20 minutes exercise?
I just told you to ignore social media, but it's worth checking. Some of the if you do work for the police force, you're doing a great job under trying circumstances. But have a word with some of your colleagues, because some of them have been a little overzealous on. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you're congregating in a park, that's bad. But I do sort of agree with Gaz that if you're wandering around in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't really matter how long you're wandering around in the middle of nowhere for.
I'll tell you what, this lockdown, what I've noticed is that people have never exercised in their life before.
Yeah.
They've suddenly got the Lycra on and out jogging or out on their bikes or whatever. I mean, the number of cyclists and joggers I've seen since this lockdown happened. And one guy, I normally see him with 4 pizzas under his arm, pest coming out the pub on an evening, and he's been out running. I can tell he's never done it before in his life.
Well, I've seen so many people walk past my house I've never seen before in my life. And I think, well, you obviously don't live around here because I've never seen you before in my life. So you've clearly driven out here to go for a walk, which is, in my opinion, I felt like shopping them for the old bill, but I didn't know where they'd parked.
Oh dear.
I just gave them a Paddington hard stare from my garden.
Can we revisit the Steve from 10 minutes ago saying that he thinks this has somehow brought the nation together? The Steve of this moment.
Yeah, but this is what the British love. Yeah.
Oh, mind the drama.
Orderly queues and grassing people up.
Yes,
I agree. So anyway, Kaz, your 2-hour walks.
Yeah, I'd say it sounds like a tiny little thing, but I've lived here for 7 years, and we've been on walks.
You never left the house because you're always watching.
But we haven't been on long walks every couple of days, to explore different parts. I mean, we live right next to some really expansive woods. You can go. We did, like, the kids did 4K. The kids
watch
did
4K all the time.
Yeah. No, that's me. The kids did 4K, and that's pretty good. My son's not even 4 yet. He's doing
impressive.
Well for that.
I found that my son is prepared to walk longer distances if he's either using one of my cameras to take photos, or he's got the radio-controlled car. Then he will go quite significant distances. Unfortunately, the radio-controlled car won't. It's got a finite range. So I have to say, at the moment, I've got a tab on Amazon open, and I'm looking at heftier radio-controlled cars to increase the operating radius. But no, photos. If you are a parent, firstly, my commiserations. If it's like anything like my experiences at the moment, I don't know what anyone else is experiencing with this, but my son is now, I would say, firmly approaching the limits of the thresholds of his patience being cooped up in the house. But obviously, he, like most children, he takes photos on tablets and phones all the time to know sort of intellectual stimulus whatsoever. But giving him my backup camera and going out for a walk, and him actually having to stop, aim, focus, that's been brilliant. It's well worth a go if you are beginning to circle the drain of things to do with your own children, and of course you've got a camera that you can afford to lose. I mean, that's a privilege that I fully concede. I say this is my backup camera. He's not going anywhere near my main one, but nevertheless, he's gone. It's all of a sudden actually making sure that he makes sure that he's standing still, he's focused, he's level, he's got what he wants in shot. We started with a prime lens, so if he wanted to make it bigger, he had to walk closer, and so on and so forth. We've upgraded to a vari lens now, and actually, I'm really impressed with some of the results he's getting.
I'm sure you've taught him the rule of thirds as the first thing ever.
That stumbles on explaining exactly what's going on in the rule of thirds, but nevertheless, in explaining to him how he wants things to appear in, how to pay attention to how he wants things to appear in the photos, he does have, it's blowing my own trumpet, he has a semi-innate understanding of what the rule of thirds is about, and I'm quite chuffed with it.
Good. And obviously Steve will want to get interested in this because with spying and all the rest of it, he'll be able to use a long lens from the
Steve,
living room.
you've got to get your webcams. Yeah. Keep a video record of all of these new people walking past the house.
I assumed when we were going into lockdown, and we were recording this on Skype, and I thought, everyone would be Skyping. And I'd never even heard of Zoom.
No, never had.
But apparently that's what everyone's using. I was like, where did that come from then?
Well,
that's got to be the luckiest startup ever, isn't it? Really?
Can we? I need to choose my words carefully here. There are some serious issues with Zoom.
Yeah, safety, security issues with it.
Yeah, and it doesn't give a single shiny shit about you. I've got to be honest. So do be careful with that. There are some alternatives out there.
Yeah, all I'm saying is I thought everyone would just pile into Skype because everyone had been using it for years, but suddenly it's like,
How many people
it's
can you
Zoom,
have
mate.
in a video Skype call, though?
Yeah, as many as you want.
Well, anyway, no one is. Apparently, they're all doing it on Zoom. And also, I read an interesting article about why there's no bog roll, which explains it quite well. And it's got nothing to do with panic buying or anything like that.
What
it's
is
just purely down to just-in-time, production and delivery.
Also,
can I talk about? I'll
No.
explain it, Ed. If you don't shut up for 5 seconds. Basically, there's two markets. There's the professional market and the consumer market, and they're completely different. Yeah, well, as in, sorry, but there'll be.
I was semi-pro for many years, but then
the commercial and the consumer, and the two are completely different. And obviously, everyone is going to. Most people, are at work during the day, and they're at home in the evening, but they're usually asleep when they're at home, and maybe they're around at the weekends. Suddenly, everyone's locked down, so they're going to the supermarket and thinking, right, I'm going to be at home more than I normally am, so I better get another 4-pack of bog roll. So they're buying a bit more bog roll because they're at home and normally they have a dump at work. So they're not panic buying and they're not hoarding. They're just buying a little bit more than they normally do because instead of being at work, they're at home. Fair enough. The problem is that people generally shit about the same every day. And so people who manufacture bog roll know exactly how much to make each week because the demand is pretty much a straight line. It's flat. So suddenly everyone's buying more bog roll because they're at home all the time, and they're like, oh god, we haven't got enough bog roll to keep keep up with demand. But they can't just take it from the professional side of the business because that's made on bigger rolls and it's made with like crappy one sheet, not as nice, and basically they can't retool the production, so there's no bog roll because everyone is dumping at home.
This is amazing standard of podcast discussion.
God, we're really smashing it this week. The level of information is just, professional bog roll, who would have thought it?
Well, no, this is true to an extent, although it's been a while since I've done any working in a place but a lot of normal, small company things are still using domestic size rolls. It's the number of places that use, like the giant dispenser style rolls. A number of those are still open anyway because they're like public toilets.
Ed, your average Starbucks is not buying expensive Andrex. They're buying the cheap stuff. Trust me, and they're buying it from a commercial supplier.
Now you see, this is where you're going. I only go into a Starbucks. Starbucks
is, or anywhere with a Kazi, basically.
When it comes to taking a shit, Steve knows his shit.
I was going to say we found your mastermind subject now.
Never ever take a shit anywhere but home. I hate going to. I would rather shit my pants than go into a public toilet.
This has made CES
anything other than a piss or a bit of cosseting.
Absolute world of hyperbole here, but
yeah. Not get that great satisfaction of I've left that elsewhere.
No, I'd be too embarrassed. I'd be in that fucking cubicle for hours. I'd be too embarrassed to leave. I'm English. English are inherently an embarrassed nation constantly, and anything like that would just embarrass me. So
speak for yourself.
Yes.
I have to be honest. If you've got to go, you've got to go. So.
Dignity years ago, didn't you?
No, well, that's not been a concern of mine. But no, I suppose that the kicker to this is, can we get ourselves some of the giant rolls?
You can.
Are there any?
You can.
I don't know. That'd be an interesting how we can all get Mr. Botwright to weld us up some, heavy duty dispensers.
The rate at which I finished my projects.
We'll be ready for the next pandemic. It's fine. It's good.
Right. Do you think we should do a podcast then? We've done 30 minutes honestly, on shit.
Well, I haven't really got anything else to say, so... If you're tuning into this for AV talk, you're shit out of luck.
You have come to the wrong place.
Right, current competitions. Mark, take us through them.
Okay, you can win a copy of Knives Out on limited edition Steelbook 4K, and that runs till 22nd of April. Also got a copy of 21 Bridges on Blu-ray. That runs till 6th of May. Also finishing on 6th of May, you've got a copy of Preacher. That's the final season on Blu-ray. You've also got a copy of The Elephant Man on limited edition 4K Blu-ray. That ends on 13th of May. And we've got copies of Criterion's May titles on Blu-ray. That one ends 19th of May. And finally, we've got a YAS 109 simple all-in-one soundbar, and that one ends on 21st of May from Yamaha. And as ever, all competitions are open to eligible AVForums members resident in the UK.
Any previous winners?
None.
Okay, maybe next week then.
He wins a lot, none, doesn't he?
He does. Wins every week. Right.
Every week, pretty much.
We're going to do some hardware news when we come back. Moving on, hardware news, and there's a little bit of hardware news and a little bit of streaming news to cover tonight in between everything else that we're talking about. Straight into this, because there's not a lot of new product coming out, but BenQ have launched 4 new products, 4 new projectors, 2 home cinema and 2 for their gaming portfolio. That's their word for it, not mine. So we've got the TK810 and the TK850, which I have both of them in the house at the moment. Now, they arrived on Tuesday. They've been in quarantine. They've done their 72 hours. Obviously, I wore gloves when I came in and washed my hands and everything. They've been sitting in the corner. I think I'm now safe to open them under the guidance. So they were unpacked this morning. And quite a neat little thing. They have a transmission, like a wireless transmitter thing. So that should be interesting to try that out. I'm not 100% sure what it does. It was in the box, so I'll find that out this week. And then they've got 2 gaming projectors, the TH685 and the TH585. Obviously, myself and Steve are waiting on the lower down model in the home cinema range, the TK421, which may have some transmission problems.
Yeah, so they're both with that wireless transmitter. And there's also going to be a TH1138, presumably, at some point.
Would that not be the THX?
Well, but they might get sued if they use it. They can get away with TH1138.
Yeah.
I want to push the luck.
So I don't have the gaming machines in. If we get desperate, I might do that. But at the minute,
what are they? 1080p, 4K? What?
Well, I think the gaming ones are 1080p. This home cinema range, they are the Texas Instruments 4K flash 4 times, quadruple flash. One's in the cinema range. The lower one is a little bit cheaper. Like I say, I've only unpacked them this morning. I don't know a hell of a lot about them, to be honest. But obviously they're in for the review, and they always produce a nice projector at that price point. They've always produced good quality, and the plus points of DLP are that they're nice and bright. Motion's always good on them, and the 4K, the way that the quadruple flash works, I mean, it tricks the eye, so it's not as sharp, obviously, as a native projector would be, because the native projector would also have a tremendous piece of glass in front of it. Obviously, this doesn't have tremendous pieces of glass. It's more likely plastic lenses. But the 810 is £1,159 and the 850 is just shy of £1,500. So they are short throw, and they will deliver up to 100-inch images from not that far away. So yeah, they look interesting, and obviously they've got motion interpolation on there as well, so if you're a bit of a sports fan, you can use interpolation with them. And I'm just having a quick look through, and the 850 has their HDR Pro technology. Now, you'll be lucky if it kicks out 70 nits, 80 nits from the projector. So in terms of HDR, what they mean by that is that you can feed it an HDR signal and it'll play it back, but it won't be in HDR. And it won't be in wide colour gamut, because projectors at this price point, you're lucky if a DLP will reach Rec 709 HD. But like I say, they look really quite good for the money. And then, like I say, the gaming machines are 1080p, 559 for the bottom range 585 model, and then the 685 is 650 quid. Pretty bright. 3500 lumens on the specs, and they've got built-in speakers as well, so it's the kind of thing that you can take around your mates and play games on, and it should have low latency as well. So like I say, I've got the home cinema projectors in there. Steve, what's the next bit of news?
The next bit of news is that BritBox is now available on LG smart TVs, and Disney Plus is now available on the Philips Android TVs. And I don't know if you saw, but Disney Plus, apparently they've got 50 million subscribers now.
Yeah,
they've done quite well, probably because they priced it cheap, and obviously the pandemic hasn't done them any harm either. Yeah, 50 million, that's quick. I mean, that was well ahead of their targets. They're probably regretting offering so many cheap offers at the beginning now, I should imagine.
Well, it was good value at $49.99 for the year, I've got to say.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Just for what's on there. Unfortunately, if you've got a Philips Safi TV, it's not on the Safi TV, because that's what I've got here at the moment. I've just wrapped Philips up the review Android on that. But it's the Android TVs where you'll get the Disney Plus.
So LG are killing it right now in terms of support of the different apps, aren't they? Because I think BritBox was about the only one I could think of that wasn't on their TVs. So they've got an absolute full house now.
Yeah,
everything.
But then, if we're being fair, I mean, the TVs are just a small progression on last year. So like we said last week, this is where they're going to make the money. Basically, they're cheaper than last year, and they're going to have lots of features on there.
Yeah, sorry, I meant in terms of backwards compatibility that they're putting it on their older TVs as well. Is quite cool.
They do, yeah. That is, I've got to say, that is commendable.
Support.
Yeah. Ed, Yamaha have launched some new AS series integrated amps. Now, this is not official, but the stuff just happened to turn up on the website.
Yes. It's a weird one. They have soft launched them. Yes, I think this is a reflection that through no fault of their own, exactly when they're going to be available for us to buy and test is slightly open-ended. They're produced, if they're the same as last time, I think they're produced in China, because they used to be produced in Malaysia. Now, of course, China is notionally out of restriction. Malaysia isn't, so that's an advantage. But yes, if you're looking for night and day differences over the preceding models, I'll summarize very quickly by saying that there are no night and day differences over the preceding models. They've simply taken what were already some very, very good amplifiers and just done some detailed work, and they haven't changed the aesthetics. So if you hated them beforehand, you'll still hate them now. If you have taste and you like them, and I do. I think they're absolutely fantastic things. Anything
hi-fi related that has massive VU meters are worth the money.
Exactly. And Yamaha has taken this idea and run with it. But nevertheless, they are well-specified amplifiers. There's no digital inputs. That's not in what Yamaha has ever done with stereo amplifiers, with the exception of the RXNs. But they have a decent selection of analog inputs, very, very good phono stages built in. They are built like things you fire into space. They're beautifully made, assuming that nothing's changed from last time, which doesn't look like it has. I very much hope to have a look at least one of them for us at some point, but it is a little bit open-ended. If you already own a 2100, a 3100 or an 1100, I don't suggest like their AV receivers that this is, I think at most they're looking for you to update every other iteration. But if you're looking for a stereo amplifier which will almost certainly outlive you, and that's not a coronavirus reference, I need to be very clear about this, they're just likely to last forever. They're hopefully going to deliver more of that and do so in a very amenable way. They're soft launching because they're being pragmatic about it. There's no conspiracy here. Hopefully things will right themselves. You'll be able to wander into dealers and start listening to them, and I'll be able to give one a thorough shakedown. I thoroughly enjoyed the preceding AS3000 integrated, which I tested years ago. So I really think that these will be something to watch. And as Phil says, if you like the aesthetic, and there's if you want something minimalist, this isn't where you need to be looking. It must be said, they do represent quite good value, because your other options that have this sort of design aesthetic, you're looking at Luxman, who are a bit more expensive, or Accuphase, who are a lot more expensive, or Macintosh, who have a funny color scheme, and they are, yes, extremely expensive. Although as ever with Macintosh, if you buy a Macintosh product, that too will last you for the rest of your natural life. So it's important to stress, as ever, that the mechanics of buying two-channel product is in part governed by the fact that the only reason you'd need to change some of these products is if you want to upgrade. They won't become obsolete, and they probably won't stop working.
Yep, good stuff. And then lastly, a little bit of TV news. We mentioned this last week, Steve, that Samsung were dropping their production of LCD. Samsung Display, yeah.
Because there was confusion, I think, last week. Samsung Display have stopped making LCD panels, or will be.
Yeah, Samsung Electronics are still making LCD TVs.
They're still making LCD TVs, yes.
And they're now going to get their LCD panels from Sharp.
Yeah, I assume this is Sharp Japan then, because obviously the Sharp brand has been changing more times than a property and monopoly.
I think I owned it for a brief period of time.
Yeah, quite. As did I believe. So I'm assuming this is Sharp Sharp Japan and their LCD production. But I mean, they already did make panels for Samsung, and I think Samsung Display only made 30% of the panels that Samsung Electronics used anyway. So I guess they're just looking at alternatives to fill that gap. I mean, hardly surprising. Obviously, they're going to, like we said last week, they're not stop. Samsung Electronics are going to continue making LCD TVs, so they need another supplier for their panels, and looks like it's going to be Sharp.
Yep, out of control yellow.
Oh, do you remember that?
Yeah,
fourth primary colour.
What?
And then hiring, what's his face, Sulu from Star Trek to advertise it. It was just bizarre. It was a bizarre. Yeah, I'm glad that little trend didn't last long.
No, it didn't last long.
Everything was like yellow.
Everything looked like the golden hour.
Yeah.
So anyway, that wraps up news. So let's move on. Let's do a couple of quick reviews, and there will be quick reviews because there's only so much you can say about a power amp. So Steve's going to try and pronounce this.
I'm still not. Can someone just clarify this? Is it Emotiva or Emotiva?
We have this conversation every time.
I've forgotten.
I believe it's Emotiva.
Emotiva.
Emotiva, I would say, but then I'm Scottish.
Well, this is the.
Emotiva sounds, it's emotion Emotiva, but Emotiva. Anyway,
I wonder if you pronounce it with the E. Emotiva.
Emotiva.
Like Spadulike.
Anyway, however you pronounce it, it's the XPA 11 channel power amp. So their range of XPA amps, actually, they're modular. So you could buy a 3-channel XPA power amp, and you could add other channels later if you wanted to expand it up to and including 11 channels, which I think is the most that they do. You can buy them, as 3, 5, 7, 9, or 11 channels. But as I say, if you did buy, say you needed 5 channels for a 5.1 system, then later you added rear channels, don't want 2 more channels, then you could increase it via your dealer. They send it off. It's not something you do yourself. You send it off. They slot in the amplification module, and then back it comes. Now this is the 11 channel one, the XPA 11. So it's got 3 mono blocks for front, left, right, and center, and then stereo modules for the other 8 channels. In other words, which would be, I guess, the sides, rears, and then if you're running 7.1.4, the 4 overhead channels. So the front 3 are 300 watts, and then the stereo, all the other channels are 65 watts, which makes sense because those are just for surrounds and effects largely. So you want a nice, powerful front soundstage, and then the rest of it is handled by less powerful amplification. But it actually uses Class AB amplification with what Emotiva refer to as switch mode power supply. So in other words, it adjusts the amount of power being used depending on what's being used and what's needed to do in terms of the signal that the amp's receiving. So it's more efficient, hopefully more responsive, and also means it doesn't weigh a ton. Which is quite nice. It's actually surprisingly not light. It's not light. Let me just rephrase this. It ain't light, but 24 kilos. But for 11-channel power lamp, 24 kilos isn't that heavy.
Yeah, I remember the data sets. You needed a forklift to lift them.
Oh, bloody hell! I literally couldn't move it. I literally couldn't move that power amp. So that was quite a nice surprise. I also say that for a power amp, I think it's quite nice looking too. It's really well built.
You have been indoors for far too long.
As power amps go, I think it's a looker.
I know where you're coming from because I really like this Yamaha that I've got in at the minute because, again, they've spent some time on the front panel and it looks...
Has it got little lights and stuff on the front?
Yeah, it's got like a circular power button socket thing that lights up. And it's just it looks nice when the processor's sat on top of it. It looks really quite smart. They've spent some time with the panel, the front panel anyway.
There's little blue lights, but you can, if you don't want them, you can turn them off with a switch at the back. It's got XLR, balanced XLR, and RCA inputs. And there's a little button or switch you flick depending on whether you're using the XLR or the RCA inputs. And it costs £2,399, which I think is really good value for an 11-channel power amp. How much is the Yamaha for?
It is competitive for 11 channels.
Yeah, no, seriously. I think for a well-made 11-channel power amp with good power and also, can I just say, performs really bloody well. I think that's cracking value. Because to be honest, your options are pretty limited when it comes to 11-channel power amps. I only know of 2, this one and the Yamaha.
Yamaha is 2,850.
Oh, well, there you go then. So it's quite significantly cheaper. I would strongly recommend this for anyone who's looking for obviously you can go other routes. If you've got a processor and you want amplification, you can buy two channel preamps and have them piled up. But a lot of times you don't want too many boxes in your rack, and if you're looking for a single box solution for the amplification side of your system, then this 11 channel power amp I think is absolutely fantastic. And I think as Phil mentioned a few weeks ago when talking about the Yamaha, when you've got dedicated amplification for your system like this, the extra headroom it provides makes a massive difference to the overall sound quality.
So especially if you're using the likes of MK speakers like we're using, Steve, which are satellite speakers. So, once again, they're not draining a lot of power from the power amp. So there's a lot of headroom there because obviously 80 hertz and below is normally taken over by, the subwoofers in the system, in a subsat system. So, again, you're not overly draining the power amp. So you've got that little bit extra headroom there to play with as well. So you don't need a hell of a lot of power, but if you give them a lot of power, the M&Ks especially, they thrive on it. Yeah, absolutely thrive on it.
But what I said, like I said at the beginning of this, what I really like is the modular nature of it, so that the amp can essentially grow with your needs. So if you don't need 11 channels to start with, then buy one of the cheaper amps that they make with, say, 5 or 7, or say you need 5 or 7 channels, buy that, and then you can just add more channels later when you need to.
Yeah.
I think it's a really sensible idea, and most other people don't do it.
I'm hoping that, and Ed's alluded to this, because obviously the hi-fi industry likes to take care of its dealers and take care of, profit margins and that kind of thing. And also they don't want to give new models every year. And hopefully, because this end of the market is starting to struggle a little bit and it needs products that, if you're spending $3,000 on a power amp and another $3,000 on a processor, or even a lot more on a processor, you can spend lots of money on that. You don't want to be, chopping that in every 2 or 3 years. So the fact that you can do that modular, and I'm sure NAD do it as well, don't they, Ed? Modular stuff. So
yes, they have performance modules. I don't believe any of their amplifiers can have channels added to them, although I'm quite happy to be proved wrong on that. But you can add that. Nevertheless, the whole thing is that if the must-have feature of year X comes along, it, in theory, is something that can be added to products from preceding years. Yeah. And they have, to their eternal credit, done that wherever they can. And
of course, Denon have started doing that. Denon Marantz have started doing that as well. So they now offer, or are going to offer, until this crisis came along, for the higher end X8500 and a couple of other products, they will swap out the boards and put HDMI 2.1 on board as well. So again, that extends the life of the product, and these are not cheap products to get into.
Yeah, when you're buying at that end of the scale, you don't want it to be the next year to find out. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I was delighted that JVC didn't bring out a new range of projectors, and instead just offered a firmware update that added new features to what you already had. And I think that's something that then the manufacturers need to start doing more often, because you can't keep changing, at the high end of your range, you can't keep swapping it out every year. I don't think it's fair on people who've just invested a large amount of money in something. Although I do appreciate that, things change fast, and sometimes certainly things like HDMI 2.1 is going to be an issue over the next couple of years, because, I mean, I don't know why, maybe there's just not that many chipsets around or something, but aside from LG, who have embraced it wholeheartedly, virtually no one else.
I think LG have cornered.
Do you think they bought them all? Do you think they bought all the supply? I'm beginning to think that might be the case, because aside from LG, like, you look at amps, AV receivers, processors, most of the other TVs, projector, no one else is using HDMI 2.1, with the exception of 8K TVs when you have to. It seems to just be LG.
But then it is an 8K solution, isn't it? It's not really for 4K solution. A lot of the stuff can already be done over 20B, so you don't really need 2.1. It's just the fact that LG have obviously put it onto their TVs, and people want to take boxes. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Anyway, so Emotiva, an American company. I think this actually is assembled in the States as well, which is unusual these days. But I think the modular approach obviously helps them with their economies of scale, because you're only making one chassis. All these amplifiers just have the same chassis, and then they just slot in the modules as you need to. So it's actually quite an economic approach to amplifier design, I guess. And as witnessed by the price of $2,399, which I'd say I think is really good value, and it sounds fantastic. It's cracking buy.
Good stuff.
I mean, in terms of putting these systems together, you're talking about the imbalance of features and so on and so forth. There's a lot to be said, and I'm sure that very few manufacturers are going to thank me for saying this, but something that does crop up with forum users and elsewhere is buying the best amplification you can get your hands on and afford, and then essentially the most affordable AV receiver with the pre-outs to run it, and you chop that in as often as is needed, and the rest of the system continues as before.
Yeah,
it's nice to buy a marquee processor, but make sure that you buy one where there's a promise of it being updated. Otherwise, you essentially have a disposable front end and in situ high quality other components. That works just as well.
Yep. No, there's a lot to be said about that kind of approach. Maybe we could even do an article on it, Ed, you know?
Easy. All right, maybe.
Well, you come out with these clever things, you could end up giving yourself extra work. Right, Ed, why don't you tell us about the Audioquest Dragonfly Cobalt?
I'll be very brief on this. This is the latest member of Audioquest's Dragonfly DACs. These are the size of a pack of chewing gum or a USB stick. They have a USB connection at one end and a 3.5mm output at the other. You may find the Cobalt a confusing arrival. I certainly did. It has exactly the same specifications as in terms of what it accepts as a format and what comes out the other end as the Dragonfly Black, which costs 80 quid. Possibly a bit more. It's all a bit variable on exchange rates, but it can be had for 80 quid. And the Dragonfly Red, which can be had for about 140, 150 quid. And this is 200 and, well, again, it varies, but around 230 to 260. The reason is the decoding is better, the filter is better, it's a more sophisticated piece of kit in terms of how it does the same piece of digital processing. And I have to be honest, it's extremely impressive. I won't go too much for going into the review on this because it's all in the review itself. But if you are looking for a means of attaching good quality earphones or headphones to a mobile phone without a headphone socket, and you don't want to go the Bluetooth route, and there are reasons why that occasionally just won't work for people, this is where you need to start looking, because it's exactly the same format as its more affordable brethren. So it's extremely small, extremely robust, and extremely easy to store about your person, and it sounds really, really, really good. It's a demonstration that the ones and zeros going in are the same, but how you then proceed to process them, filter them. And I cannot stress filtering, especially since we moved away from just having CD quality audio. Filtering, there's a case there being a right and a wrong answer. There are many different correct answers, and they all make a huge difference. And the end result is a product which has seen a lot of use whilst it's been here, and is well worth checking out. But the full review goes into all the details of why I think that's the case.
Okay, good stuff. That wraps up our hardware section of this week's podcast. Next, we're going to movies. So we do have some movie news to get through. We're going to do that after the streaming because it's all streaming based, so we may as well move it to that point. So first of all, some film reviews. They are on the homepage as we speak, and as you listen to the podcast, if you're listening to us on the week that we go out. So what are those, Kaz?
We got Rhythm Section, which was actually another
title.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's got a reason. The Rhythm Section is supposed to be the musical interpretation of various parts of your body that have to work together to enable you to take the perfect shot. So you have to get your rhythm section tuned up to be able to take that shot. So it must
I'm
work.
I'm switching off already.
It must work.
I read it, all I can see is the rhythm method.
Yeah. I mean, it had some good ideas. I mean, it had Blake Lively, and she was doing well off the bat of The Shallows, but she broke her fist punching Jude Law for one of the scenes, and it got pushed back a year, and then they delayed it a few more months, and then it got released, like The Hunt, at a really bad time. Now, I have to say, it got one of the worst openings ever, and I can see why it's gone down that route. It's a very flawed production. It's got all the material there, but they don't know how to put up on screen. And a big problem with that is they go with that in media res starts, the cold open. So it's a Abrams' favorite, isn't it? Where they show you a bit from halfway through the film at the beginning, and then they go back and show you what happened to get there. The reality is, with a movie like this, you have no interest in what happened to get there once you've seen that beginning, because it doesn't matter. It almost doesn't matter. So for an hour of the film, you're like, I know what happens next, and you're spoon feeding me this. It's a film which could have done with a better editor, better chronology, and pieces put together in a better way. It's got a fantastic from in the car action scene, which is like a extended long take chase sequence, which is really good. I think Blake Lively's really good as an assassin who's come from nowhere, rather than your Atomic Blondes and your Salts. There is something to be said for all the ingredients they put in, but a bit like American Assassin, which is the one they did recently with Michael Keaton. Another, I think it's Mitch Rapp. Is that the name of the character? Right, yeah. So there's a whole franchise to be made. They always have their eyes on this franchise, so they want to like lay the groundwork for a long.
Biggest problems in Hollywood.
Just make a good movie, and I think that's what holds back things like this, because there is material here, good material, but they're too focused on 6 films to make one good one.
So, Kaz, to summarise, then, what you're saying is it needed to be tighter, it needed a better timing to it, better rhythm to it.
Yeah, I did say that. Yes, I think it did. I think you could take the same material, restructure it, strip out a little bit, and actually have a taut, decent thriller. As it is, it's a bit of a flawed mess. I gave it a 6 out of 10 because I see some good in there, but I can see why it utterly flopped on a big open.
And you also looked at?
I also looked at Mortal Kombat Legends: Scorpion's Revenge. Now, I have to say, I really didn't expect this to be any good, to the point where I thought, well, I might not even review it. But it's absolutely tremendous. It's a full-on 18 animation. Takes you back to the sort of glory days of Akira, and it's proper violent in the style of Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat was the game that got the games ratings introduced. It was that violent that they had to bring in age ratings to avoid kids playing the wrong kind of game. And this
like kids stop any of us.
No, of course not. But I mean, like, it was that violent, bone ripping, spine cracking, ultra
fatalities.
Yes.
Finish
and somehow they turned that into a horrendous live action movie, which was a PG or PG-13, and obviously didn't have any of what made Mortal Kombat.
But it did. Can we
have Christopher Lambert
doing a wildly inappropriate accent, as is apparently something written into the contract of every single film he does.
Yes, it did have Christopher Lambert hamming it up. But, I mean, the franchise has floundered. Warner's got it now. Warner have churning out these DC animations, and their DC animations are really good, but they're still restricted by PG-13 to a certain extent. And this is their first R, and 18 in this country, and it's properly violent and very satisfying. And they take a decent story with some characters you feel for and tear up the screen with utter carnage. I mean, if the first 15 minutes doesn't have you hooked into how many people can lose their heads in this, and it's really a very entertaining ultraviolet animation with a story. And I'd never thought I'd say that about a Mortal Kombat Legends spin-off movie, five movies down the line. Really enjoyed it. So I gave that an 8, and I'd recommend it for anyone who likes a decent animation.
How do we go about watching it, Kaz?
You can download and keep this one. It's not a premium rental. I think if you want to go that far, you can import the 4K disc from America.
I'll pass, but where do I download it from?
Oh, anywhere, Amazon, Apple, okay, no, all the usual places. But you might be lucky with some places like Apple. I've got a feeling if they're the kind of people who they'll give you the 4K one for the same as the HD. They'll give you whatever the better quality is. So if you have a look on
violence, I'll live with it being 1080. So I could just do with some cathartic death.
Very, very much so. I'd be interested to see what you think. I'd be surprised if Mark didn't love this as well.
I don't watch these things to think.
Have you heard of this, Mark?
No, I hadn't actually. But I'm slowly starting to kind of recognise that some of the DC animations are very good. Certainly, we're seeing kind of more of this style of thing come out, and I'm very much interested now.
Yes, it was a pleasant surprise for sure.
Okay, so let's move on. Let's have a look at what's coming out disc-wise. If we want to keep buying physical media, which still has its place in the world. 4K releases. I was going to go and buy this, but again, £25. I think if I wait, because I've seen the film, I saw it at the cinema. I think if I wait a few weeks, it'll be in the 2 for $30 offers everywhere, because it's one of those titles. But Jumanji: The Next Level, Kaz, you've seen the disc, and I think Steve's got it as well.
Yeah, I've got it.
Yeah. It's a fantastic disc.
Yep.
And I really did enjoy the movie. For me, it's the two Dannys all the way. I'm a child of the Lethal Weapon era, and twins, and seeing Danny Glover and Danny DeVito, and seeing what they do with it and again, I use this in a review, a very face-off kind of way. So the way one actor impersonates another, I mean, they
do take it to the next level in this one, because the first one was great, and that's probably why they called it the next level. But they take the actor playing the other actor, they just play upon that and start doing double crosses and all the rest of it, and it's hilarious, especially when you think that you're looking at The Rock, and he's a great actor, and he's a great physical actor.
Yeah, you have to stop and think, actually, these people, The Rock and Kevin Hart, are actually acting. I know they're having a laugh, and I know they're having fun, but they're so involved in their characters that you believe they're the other people they're supposed to be. That's acting. I had a lot of fun watching it.
Steve, did you see that on Twitter? I thought about copying you. I don't know if you've seen it, where someone was saying, after all this is the current situation is dealt with, it's time to give The Rock the Benito Mussolini biopic that he so richly deserves. And then I looked at him and I thought, oh, God, yeah, you could probably make that really, really convincing.
Yeah, I'd watch it.
Yeah, but you'd watch anyway.
Yeah, true. I enjoyed Next Level. I thought it was really good, and obviously it does. That's clearly the conceit of the original film, is you're inhabiting an avatar, so anyone could be playing the Rock character in the game, and they play with that massively in this. And the same with Jack Black, who's doing a different person's using that avatar, so that gives them room to have I guess there's ample room here to muck about with it for a few films and give the actors a chance to play different people playing them, if you see what I mean, which is
and
the fun comes in.
Jack Black is so underrated as an actor as well.
Yeah, he is. Yeah,
I still love
and Karen Gillan. Karen Gillan is good in it too.
I'll watch anything with her in it.
Mm-hmm, yeah, me too.
No, I thought it was a lot of fun. Jumanji was, it was a lot of fun, and considering the first one was a pleasant surprise for me. I don't think I'd seen it at the cinema. And I got it on disc, and I thought, well, what is this? I remember the old movie, and what could this be? And it was very, very, very nice surprise. What they did with it.
The Robin Williams one, it hasn't aged well at all. It was on Sky a couple of weeks ago, and I sat down to watch it, and no, it hasn't aged well at all.
To be fair, some of the special effects looks a bit dodgy.
They look dodgy in '95, in all honesty.
They did. Yeah, they did. Right, okay, so we're supposed to be an AV podcast, so what's the disc like in terms of picture and sound?
I thought the disc was tremendous. I mean, Steve mentioned this before I even had the disc, because he had the US version like a year ago. But it's another one of these 2K digital intermediates like Le Mans, which, I mean, it's just defies anyone complaining about what the source material is. I mean, it's
I think
it's very good looking.
There's a lot of misunderstanding about a 2K DI being upscaled in resolution, because people just assume that that's like what their TV does, and it's nothing like that. It's nothing like what an upscaler would do with it. There's a lot of time and care and experience behind these transfers. And transfer is obviously the wrong word to use now as well. You can see how long ago it was when I last reviewed a disc. But yeah, it's moved on, and a 2K DI can look just as good as a native 4K DI.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Especially when you chuck in HDR and then the Atmos sound. Oh no, DTSX soundtrack, isn't it?
Yeah.
DTSX soundtrack.
I think that two of the telling ones were John Wick 1 and 2, because I'm pretty sure the first one was native.
That's
and the
native.
second one was a 2K DI, and I think the second one looked better. I mean, they look both look tremendous, but I think the second one looked better.
Yeah, well, it's when you add white color and HDR, like Steve said, that's definitely what makes a big difference these days. Yeah. Right, and again, when you're capturing stuff as well, I mean, a lot of these things are captured 6.5K, 8K, and so on, and you can do the experiment yourself. If you've got a 4K camera and whatever, and you shoot something in 4K and then output it at 1080, it looks better than something that's filmed on a 1080 camera because you're capturing that extra information in it. Anyway,
it looks tremendous, and the DTSX IMAX Enhanced track is, as you might expect, very loud. And
well, they've done that from the beginning of time. They used to say it was their bit rate because they used to do things at 1500 kilobits per second, but no, it was
they just dialed it up.
Dialed up, just dial it up. Right, Blu-ray wise, what can we have?
Yeah, you got Edward Norton in Motherless Brooklyn, which I never got to check out, but it does look interesting, and The Cranes Are Flying, which is Criterion's release of the week.
And then TV and streaming wise, what do we have?
There's a movie, Sergio, on Netflix, which is the guy from Narcos who played Escobar.
I think it's Narcos, not Narcos.
Narcos. Okay. And you got Killing Eve season 3, which starts as this podcast goes out, I think.
No, it's tomorrow. Streaming tomorrow on iPlayer.
Yeah, that's
but it's live now, isn't it?
I thought it was next Sunday.
I don't know.
I think it's
on the
iPlayer.
13th.
I thought it was
which is
iPlayer
the
on
day
Monday.
that this podcast goes out, isn't it?
Yeah. iPlayer on Monday.
Yeah.
Live on, well, not live, but on TV on the Sunday, the following Sunday. So if you want to watch it first, you can watch it on iPlayer.
Still only
weekly,
wait though, annoyingly.
Yeah, it's weekly this time, whereas previously they did it. I guess they want to string it. Look, they're not going to dump it. They've got no content. All right, nothing's getting produced at the moment. So,
I thought the end of season 2 was a bit wacky, but I'm up for more.
It's had mixed reviews. Season 3, I've seen that. So anyway, I'll watch it.
Yeah, she's a very good villain, and reminded me a little bit of the way Betty Gilpin played the character in The Hunt. Just completely surprised you with the tone she was taking.
I would still watch Betty Gilpin read a phone book.
You've also got Mortal Kombat, as mentioned, and Rhythm Section.
Just recommend something. I popped up. I saw it yesterday. I think it's been just recently been added to Amazon Prime in their film section. But there's a really good documentary about Quentin Tarantino called QT8. So it's about the first 8 films. And it's worth checking out.
Oh, yeah, I have heard about that. Yeah.
Good stuff. Mortal Kombat, that was a game, wasn't it, Mark? Have you got something game-wise to mention?
No. Yeah, very short bit of gaming news. The PlayStation 5 controller has been shown off. And
it's the same shape.
No, it's marginally different.
Ooh.
And everyone assumed it would be called the DualShock 5. Well, no. Sony have surprised everyone and called it the DualSense, which doesn't make...
Does anybody care anymore?
Well, no,
really?
In fairness, this is... if you are a designer, and I don't know how many designers listen to this podcast, I'm sure they're busy designing things, but nevertheless, it's been an ongoing argument for some time because, there's a meme about this, that Nintendo, when they released the console, they completely redesigned the controller to do what they perceived the console is going to be doing at that time. That's why there is no really traceable pattern in Nintendo handset design. Microsoft appears to take a basic pattern, but there is a great degree of derivation as to where things are, the size of it. So it's recognizably an Xbox controller, but it's been messed about with over the years. Sony has been astonishingly consistent in how the controller has looked since the original PlayStation. From the moment that they introduced the analog sticks in the DualShock controller on PlayStation 1, all the way through to the current iteration PlayStation 4 controller, you could look at it, even if you'd been dropped out of a hole in time from 1999, and know that that was a PlayStation controller. So what Mark's saying, it is quite a big deal if they're it's been 20 years where they've augmented the controller but not fundamentally messed about with the industrial design, and this is the first time they've done it. Yes,
color scheme with the face buttons, that kind of thing. Now they've gone for this kind of black and white look, and so they've taken away the color from that. It does feel a bit like kind of, we have to think of something different to do at some point. But I mean, it's the guts of the controller that are more interesting. It's basically all the things that we kind of were rumored anyway, which was rumble's going to be replaced with haptic feedback, and you'll have these adaptive triggers, which, it could be a bit of a game changer, no pun intended. But the way in which, say, they give the example of a car driving over mud or driving over, gravel, should give a different feel. And the adaptive triggers, being able to differentiate between two triggers, between a brake pedal and an accelerator, things like that. So it gives different levels of resistance. They sound like small incremental improvements, but this is what Sony have always done with their controllers. They don't reinvent the wheel. They don't, as Ed alluded to, they don't go down the Nintendo route. They find just the best way that kind of developers can keep on utilizing, and all the things that Sony do well, which is kind of find a middle ground. That's what they've always done.
I have to be. It's one of the reasons I've continuously bought PlayStations. Is I am, my relationship with my limbs is one where we communicate on reasonably good terms. But I'm not the most coordinated human being that ever strolled the earth. And at the very least, I can pick up a PlayStation controller, and everything's pretty much where I remember where it was, and it just continues to function in a manner that I recall. Whereas Xbox controllers, there are some Xbox games I love very, very much, but I've never really got on with the handset terribly well.
See, there are a lot of people who are completely the opposite.
No, exactly.
Because a stick placement is the big thing. If we want to get into an HD DVD versus Blu-ray debate, asymmetrical stick placement would be the similar one in gaming circles.
Oh, I quite agree. I think in some ways this is, if we're going to disappear down a rabbit hole, this is as much the Nikon versus Canon SLR business here. It as much as anything comes down to the first one you pick up and learn the ropes on.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there you are.
The only thing that I don't like about the look of this, well, I mean, I think it looks butt ugly, to be perfectly honest. That it looks like a crappy third-party pad, the kind of thing that you used to give to your friend when you were playing Street Fighter 2. But the LED light bar, they've changed that from being on the front of the controller to around the touchpad. Now it's less kind of intrusive, because always one of the problems was if you were playing in a darkened room and then you had, you've got the screen right in front of you, the reflection of that would be particularly distracting. But I do hate these little lights on controllers. They may seem thoroughly minimal to you in a brightly lit kind of expo or something like that, but if you're playing in complete darkness or something like that, they really can be quite bright, and so that still does slightly annoy me. But looks interesting. Pretty much all the things that we assumed it was going to be. Okay, and a cracking impression there in the middle, Mark, of Ed. I think you've nearly nailed that. Spot on.
Well, it's a podcast. I thought we were supposed to discuss these things.
Yeah, exactly. Where else would we get this level of toilet paper debate? Right, okay, moving on as well. I've done this back to front, but whatever. Don't stick into the rules at the minute. Streaming news. Right, a few good bits of news if you're stuck in the house with nothing to watch. The first bit, Kaz, about Virgin Media.
Yeah, Virgin Media TV customers get 18 free channels from Monday.
Actually, they added to even more on the Thursday.
Oh, did they really? And more Sky channels added for free on Thursday. And Roku launches free Roku channel in the UK.
More channels of shit then, basically.
Well, I don't know. There's some decent stuff in there, actually, because I think it's all the Sky channels now. So you got Sky 1, 2, Arts, Comedy, Crime, Witness, Sports. Well, there's nothing on Sports. Sports News, nothing on that either. Movies 2, Sci-Fi E. What the heck? I don't know what that is. And then you got some on-demand stuff as well. So it's actually for free.
That's not bad.
It's not bad.
I noticed on Now TV they've added National Geographic, haven't they?
Really?
Yeah. So Crash Investigations, fill your boots, boys.
Shut up. Oh.
Um,
What's that under? Which pass is that under?
Under entertainment part.
Oh, well, that's me not sleeping for a week.
I don't know if that's because, presumably one of the reasons we were moaning about over the last couple of weeks why Disney Plus still feels like a pale comparison to its US version is because they've still got outstanding contracts with Sky.
For as long as I'm paying for that
Giving me
outstanding contract, I give no shits.
But yeah. So I was watching a few docs about the Apollo missions and that sort of stuff on it.
Well, no, I'm just going down a plane impacting orgy of, I've missed it. I haven't seen it in 2 years. I've got so many to catch up on.
Yeah, there's lots there, and there's some really interesting stuff as well.
Interesting in inverted commas. Massive, terrifying fireworks of death.
That's there's some sheer incompetence, absolutely.
Nothing will ever touch that Swiss pilot one.
The one that took off on the Tenerife.
No. This is the
that
guy.
was KLM.
KLM, wasn't it?
This is the guy who had failed every exam he'd ever taken, but was still basically
He's still
unemployed
flying.
because they couldn't find anyone else. And one of the things he'd done is retracted the undercarriage on a plane whilst it was still on the ground, and amazingly not been sacked at that point.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the single most in terms of, for the most part, I've maintained this for years, and I'm sorry for repeating myself. Air Crash Investigation is actually quite an inspiring program because it demonstrates the incredible lengths to which investigators will go to ensure that an issue never happens again.
Yeah.
That is one of the very few episodes which left me with an utterly empty feeling, because it's like, well, fundamentally, there's not the same protection against people who are just shit.
Well, I mean, one of the things it does highlight is that just how professional the professionals are. So you look at the British investigators, the American NTSB, and so on, and it gives you a really good insight if you're interested in any way into procedural, investigation stuff. The thing is, you've worked it out in the first 5 minutes. If you've ever seen an air crash investigation, you can work it out within the first 5 minutes.
Columbo.
Well, you can work it out because they have to build it up. It has to be an hour long. So they don't actually do it in chronological order, because a lot of these things that they spend maybe 7 minutes on in the program is something that they would have discussed quickly within 40 seconds, proven it wasn't the case, and then moved on to something else. So they have to pad it out a little bit. But it's really interesting when you actually, because it does break the investigation down. And if you've ever investigated anything, and I have done that, I can tell you it's really, really accurate in terms of how they would actually go about proving and disproving certain points. And that becomes really, really important when you have stuff like pilots who sadly, mental health issues, commit suicide and take everybody with them. Those are the most difficult investigations to do, because you have to prove, in a lot of cases, something where they've switched off the recorders and so on because they know what they're going to do. And it's watching stuff like that, which is it's deeply harrowing. But at the same time, there is that interest in, well, how do you get your proof together, and how do you prove what has actually happened? And it's fascinating from that point of view. It really
There is also one really heartening little story. One of the programs a couple of years ago involved an accident that was one of Niki Lauda's aircraft, which then meant that they had to have an actor play Niki Lauda, and it would appear that after it was broadcast, Niki Lauda sent them a little email saying that he thought they'd done very well with finding someone who generally did his mannerisms and things, but it pointed out that he didn't swear anything like enough for it to be Niki Lauda, which is in its own way just touchingly magnificent. Another person sorely missed.
Yeah. So Ed knows what he's doing for the rest of the lockdown. So yeah, normally at the end of the podcast we discuss our favourite films, or what's our favourite this, that, and the next thing. But really, we've all had our routines turned upside down. Even those of us who work from home from a living and haven't really changed much.
I haven't really.
and I would say that I haven't changed that much, but I have changed some of the things that I do. And in terms of watching TV and so on, I've been doing a lot of that because we've got the new services like Disney Plus and so on. There's been a lot more to watch, and I've been doing a lot of it on the projector. So the TV's hardly had any looking in the living room, to be honest, because I'll work in the living room, and it's kind of been my little escape to get away from the office, as it were, and go and watch stuff on an evening. And I've been watching quite a bit of stuff actually, and getting through this and that and watching it on the projector, and it's been really quite entertaining. So in that respect, I have changed the way that I've been working and the way that I've been living within this house that I'm normally in anyway. What about you, Steve?
Yes, I think if I'm being honest, my behaviour hasn't changed much at all because I'm doing all the same things I always did. I would like to say, since they're on the podcast this week and they were on it last week, thank you to Kaz. I piled through The Outsider after you recommended it 2 weeks ago.
Oh, and you enjoyed it?
Loved it. And the reason I didn't watch it the first time was because the first episode went up and everyone was moaning about it having a glacial pace and really slow. I thought it was perfectly paced. It was brilliant. Really enjoyed it. Very tense, very creepy. Great performances from everyone. I thought it was fantastic. And also, after Mark recommended it, I watched Tiger King, which is utterly compulsive viewing. And I'm delighted to see that apparently Donald Trump's thinking of pardoning Exotic Joe, which means we might get season 2. So even better.
Can I just do a public service announcement here? Steve has accurately pointed out that Air Crash Investigation is on Now TV. However, it's just the latest season, and at the time of me saying this, there are 3 days left. So I've got 3 days to plough through 10 episodes. I mean,
that's what you were going to do anyway.
Challenge accepted, obviously. But nevertheless, get your shift on. If you're listening to this, you don't have long. Well, if you've been listening to it. So.
You're towards the start of the month, Ed, so you're all right. You can have a day off.
I've actually already done 2 of your reviews. This is the crazy mixed-up world in which we live in.
Well, I mean, if it's 10 episodes, it's only 10 hours worth of viewing, so you can get that done.
It's less than that because it's 44 minutes. The adverts aren't in. Yeah. So it's about 8.5. But nevertheless, I'm gonna have to commit to the cause to get this done in time. I'd
probably also shout out to Stars, because Stars Play has got an offer that ends on the 15th. So you've got literally 2 days. But it's 99p a month for the first 3 months. And I finally bit the bullet. I've been meaning to for ages, and I'm sure I'll review some content off there, but because it hasn't previously been accessible to me. It's an add-on that I think you have to get through Amazon. That's the only way I found it. But 99p a month gets you Doom Patrol, Mr. Mercedes, Pennyworth, Castle Rock. I mean, it might not mean something to everybody, but these are really good shows which have been largely US-based. Well, Doom Patrol is a spin-off from Titans, DC's Titans, which is an excellent DC entry.
Which is on Netflix now.
Yeah, but they didn't get Doom Patrol, and Doom Patrol is fantastic. Timothy Dalton, really good set of very quirky characters. Mr. Mercedes is Brendan Gleeson, and he can carry anything. And it's Stephen King, a bit like The Outsider. Proper hard-boiled.
Oh, is that the character that's also got the?
Yes. So she comes in later. She comes in later. So that's well worth. It's what reminded me, Steve.
Unfortunately, not the same actress, but
it isn't. But I mean, the same character, and the character is amazing. I mean, the actress is great in The Outsider, but it's worth. It's 99p. It's worth checking out. You get 3 seasons of Mr. Mercedes. You get Doom Patrol. Pennyworth. I mean, who wanted a TV show about Alfred? It's actually pretty good. So there's also a Ben Kingsley show on there, which I quite liked. I think
Castle Rock is the Stephen King series.
Castle Rock is it's inspired by Stephen King. It's weird. It's not him, but it's almost every character from all of his books in the same town together. So it's kind of weirdly meta Stephen King, and it's very effective.
All of his books take place in Maine.
Yeah,
mostly
exactly.
in the town of Castle Rock.
Rock, yeah. So it's there. As I say, there's a Ben Kingsley show called Perpetual Grace, where basically Ben Kingsley gets to be the guy he was in Sexy Beast, which is a raving, swearing, lunatic psychopath. Pretty much the best Ben Kingsley character you can ever get. And it makes that eminently watchable. Spanish Princess, if you watch The White Princess and White Queen, you've got Spanish Princess now, Counterpart, J.K. Simmons. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on there you can't get anywhere else. And as I say, 99p a month. You're on lockdown. Do it.
Where can I get Forged in Fire?
History HD. So anything that has history on it and the
But
channel.
then it also makes it to some of the Freeview way down the dial channels, admittedly with a substantial delay.
Yeah, I haven't got a TV aerial at the moment.
Oh no, don't worry, neither do I. But I remember it happening. Well, mine blew off, and then I was all set to get put back on the wall, and then the apocalypse happened. So in
answer to your question, though, Phil, this is my bar might be serious for a second, because I was thinking about this, and then, funnily enough, I was watching or listening to and watching Fat Man Beyond with Kevin Smith and Mark Bernardin. Mark Bernardin, who also wrote an episode of Castle Rock, and they are asking the same question, which was I work from home, and in all intents and purposes, the lockdown hasn't massively affected me yet. Touch wood. I assumed it would be my work output would be the same because I'm just doing the same stuff at home as I always do, and I found my work output has fallen off. And I was thinking, and they were saying the same thing. They thought they'd be getting a lot of work done, but they aren't. And I was thinking, I wonder why that is. And then they came up with this. Well, Mark Bernardin came up with a solution, which I thought that might be true, in even if it's a subliminal way. Is that this is not quite the apocalypse, but it is traumatic. It is something that's happening to all of us. It's something that whilst we could have said, well, a pandemic was inevitable, living through it's a very different experience. And even if you aren't necessarily being directly affected by it much at the moment, it must still play on the back of your mind, and that might be why you
definitely does.
It absolutely does. I mean, it's somebody who's got PTSD anyway from previous careers. It does play on your mind. You can't. I know Ed said get away from social media and so on, but in the work that we're in, I have to have TweetDeck running, and it's impossible not to look at TweetDeck. Because you're always looking for a bit of breaking news or whatever that might be happening in our industry, and that's the best place to get. But you can't shield yourself off from social media, and it plays a big part in how you're feeling and how you're interpreting what's going on. So you're absolutely right. I mean, my routine has not changed one iota, other than I can't go out when I want to go out, and I didn't do that very often anyway. It was only car meets and that kind of thing on a weekend, so I haven't felt the urge to go out or anything else, but at the same time, I have felt my anxiety raised a little bit. I am thinking about things differently, like just going outside for a walk. That's a different experience to when you could just do it whenever you wanted. You have to think about where you're going to go for a walk, because anywhere in my village, I used to go on the line, the old railway line. Well, it's 4 feet wide. So there's no way you can avoid anybody if you're walking on the line. And if you've got joggers and people on bikes going past who are sweating and breathing everywhere, the last place you want to be is standing 4 feet away from them. So just think little things like that. You start thinking and wondering, well, what's the safest way of doing this, and how and going into Tesco's, I will not lie, my heart rate goes up when I'm in Tesco's, and I'm thinking, you're too close, or I need to avoid this person. This guy looks like an idiot. I have to avoid him. And that's the way your mind starts working. Like you said earlier on as well, there was people on the path. You're noticing these things subconsciously or whatever, or because of the mood that's around at the minute. You're thinking, who are you? Why are you there? What are you doing that? So yeah, absolutely, I get that completely, Steve. I agree with that 100%. Anybody else, Mark?
I tend to think, though, perhaps part of the reason why people's productivity kind of drops off is that you kind of get into almost this collective mindset of everyone's pacing themselves for months of this, and so the less productivity there is around you, the less you do. It's an odd thing. You don't like, say, traffic noises and other people buzzing around and stuff like that. However, when there's more of a kind of just general, not relaxed, but almost like somber atmosphere around, it does lend you to kind of almost fall into a more kind of soporific state where you don't get as much done. Even it's been nice weather. People have been exercising. There are various positives still, you can find in day-to-day life. However, it's very easy to kind of fall away from this idea of keep a routine, keep productive, and that kind of thing, when essentially you kind of look at it more almost like a kind of prison stretch or something. Pace yourself for several months, because what you don't want to do is find yourself without things to do.
Yeah.
And then you've got an extra, kind of few months ahead of you. And then, then you will go mad. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm not absolutely kind of binging TV series or all this kind of stuff, all these books that I've got lying about that I said to myself, at some point I'm going to have the time to read these. You think you don't want to kind of just dive down that rabbit hole completely. You want to still kind of...
Actually, weirdly, just to interject, books are the one thing I am very consciously rationing, because getting more of them, because my normal place for securing more books is charity shops.
Yep, same here.
And they're all shut. So I'm not rationing music. I'm not really... I don't watch anything like as much TV or film as you guys anyway, so that's a different case in point. And I suddenly find myself up against it to complete Air Crash Investigation. But books... And people say, oh, just Kindle. I don't have a proper Kindle. I have Kindle as an allowance on my iPad. I do not enjoy reading for hours on my iPad screen. It's a lovely, lovely screen, but it's not the same as reading a book. So books are the one thing which I am hoarding, unquestionably. I've got books left to read, and I'm deliberately not ploughing through them because I don't know when I can easily replace them. And obviously you can buy more new books on Amazon, but one, that's placing a load which expensive. It's placing a load on getting in the way of more pressing requirements of people. So books is a really weird one. It hadn't occurred to me until you said it, Mark, but that's one area where I am really holding back, and it's suddenly made sense to me now.
Whilst I'm sure people will go to the pub, I personally have no interest in getting anywhere near a plane or anything involving lots of people or any enclosed space or anything, any press event, any trip, anything until there's a vaccine, because this can easily come back. And as Boris Johnson's only 3 years older than me, nearly died of it, clearly underlying health issues aren't necessarily a cause. So it's not worth the risk.
It's a funny one. I'm possibly less absolutist. I don't want to say never, but yes, I too have looked at rationalising certain aspects of behaviour. The only thing I would say is it would appear, just based on work scheduling and stuff, that a number of my colleagues have fully furloughed. And
that's because they're all 80.
Well, yes, that is I suspect, but nevertheless, this is an industry based on short-term reputation. So you keep working and you keep turning in the required stuff. You keep being the person that the surviving organisations go to for more stuff. So good luck,
that's
guys.
another worry, isn't it? Is what's going to survive this?
I don't know.
Revenues have gone out the window. It's I suppose you're right, Phil. These things, even in the back of your mind, they're preying on your mind, thinking like,
absolutely,
what's going to happen over the next 18 months? If magazines go down, they don't come back.
No, once print magazines.
Print magazines
cannot.
I'm referring to specifically. Yeah, online is different, but print magazines, if it goes, it goes. It's gone forever.
There's no coming back from that.
Well, the point was made. I mean, with regard to sports, that if things go bad, then we will lose entire leagues of football in this country.
There's still time to avoid the Premier League season, though, Mark.
No.
Bet myself if that happens.
No, I will be livid.
We'll be able to power the country off the righteous fury coming out of Liverpool alone. So I think it's well worth it.
Yeah. No, sorry. I guess we are kind of lucky.
Yes.
In the jobs that we have, in the industry that we're in. Touch wood, we have been up to this point not impacted in the same way as people who manufacture goods or work in other sectors that have been completely decimated, or you're self-employed and your business has just disappeared and so on. My heart goes out to you. It's never a nice thing. It's happened to me a couple of times in my lifetime where a job's just disappeared, and I know what that feels like. We have been kind of lucky. What I feel for people like my stepdad, who at this time of year would be out kayaking, out walking the dogs 3 times a day. He's an outdoors person and he's climbing the walls. And I know lots of people like that who just cannot keep themselves inside, or it's it's something that they're just not used to. So we're used to it, and the impact hasn't really impacted on us. But like I say, people, their worlds have completely gone, and I really, really feel for them. And then you've got the other people who they're not good indoors people at all. And again, I feel for you, because it can't be easy at all. The only person we haven't heard from is Kaz. Is he going for another 2-hour walk?
Yeah, I've always been used to being indoors for prolonged periods of time. It's actually getting out and doing stuff like going for a walk has been a nice plus side to this. But I agree with your sentiments. I mean, I think a part of everyone's reaction to this has surely got to be the open-endedness of it. I mean, initially it was like, we're going to lock you down for 3 weeks. I don't think many people really thought it was going to be 3 weeks. But how many people think it's going to be, July or August or September or next year? And we monitor it in a different way, or at least I sometimes do, which is like the release schedule of films. And you notice everything gets pushed back till next year. But for some stupid reason, Disney are releasing Mulan in July, I think. And all I can think is
a strange call on their part.
They're so optimistic. I mean, yeah. But
unless they know something we don't.
Yeah,
maybe they know the Chinese theatres are going to be open in July, and that's what they're going for. Interestingly, they moved the Artemis Fowl to Disney Plus. Although God knows whether we'll
there's no surprise there.
That was never going to make any money. No. But apparently, and this was really interesting, under the terms of their purchase of 20th Century Fox, any film that was finished at the time of purchase, they are contractually obliged to theatrically release, which means that they can't just... they're contractually obliged to theatrically release it. So they have to theatrically release the New Mutants. Unless they maybe could get, like the director and the stars to all sign off on it not being theatrically released. But even then, they couldn't stick on Disney Plus because there's an existing deal Fox have got with HBO. So New Mutants, I think, might be cursed.
But it's also not really Disney Plus fodder, isn't it?
Disney
Plus doesn't have anything.
I don't think it's R-rated. I think it was meant to be more of a horror-y kind of vibe, but they could have stuffed it on as an X-Men movie, isn't it, effectively? But anyway, yeah, I didn't realise that they have to theatrically release it, and they're contractually obliged to. So God's when they're going to do that. But yeah, I think Disney's plans look a bit optimistic in places. I'm not quite sure they're going to get away with it, July.
Well, I mean, you look at things that just 3 weeks ago, or 4 weeks ago, we were all quite comfortable doing. And if you were to see a video played back of what you were doing 4 weeks ago compared to how you're behaving now, it would look really, really odd to you now, because over the last 4 weeks, we have all been conditioned to think a certain way. Whether we like it or not, that's just been a rolling consequence of what's going on. You are being conditioned to act and behave in a certain way. You're being conditioned to do that to save lives, though. There is no dark side to that at all. But
be interesting to see where that leads. I mean, will people go back to shaking hands? Will people go back to mass gatherings? Will people, how easy will
I told you, Kaz, as soon as I can go to a pub, I'm off to a pub.
Yeah, that's different, though. But
the rise of the
because you're an alcoholic.
High-functioning alcoholic.
I still think people are going to think about where they're putting their hands and what they're doing, and I still think it might make handshaking a bit outdated. It might be that someone has the brainwave to actually suggest that maybe we could just stop it.
They
sharing germs.
Towards the end of Contagion, the film, there's a bit where he shakes the guy's hand and explains where the handshaking gesture originally came from, which is to show you weren't armed. That film is so unbelievably bang on the money in every single way except one. In the film, they assume they have a functioning federal government.
Well, and whilst it shows supermarkets being generally empty rather than specifically stripped of all their toilet paper.
Yeah. Who knew? But now we know why that was. I've explained that at the beginning of this podcast.
Yes,
so
no,
there
absolutely.
you go. And on that
we want to hear it again.
Thanks for the suggestion to be light-hearted at the end there, Mark.
Sorry, that's all right. Because I'm a bit of a left turn, didn't I?
But anyway, that's all we got time for on this week's bumper edition. If you're still with us, thanks for listening up until this point. If you've got anything that you want to add to any of the discussions, then please do so in the discussion area, either on YouTube or on the forums underneath this podcast. But my thanks to Ed Selley.
There's no choice. It has to be that. It's that or the end.
Kaz Harlow.
When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
Steve Withers.
Get that guy off the air.
And Mark Botwright.
Ooh, lighter fluid.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums for the latest reviews, news and video, plus why not leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. Also head over and check out our YouTube channel for videos on the latest reviews, and while you're there, feel free to subscribe. I'm Phil Hinton, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.